Be me, 38 years old, sitting in my parked car outside my ex-husband's apartment, watching through the window as he helps our daughter with her math homework. They're both laughing at something. She's got flour on her cheek, they must have been baking. He wipes it off with his thumb, and she rolls her eyes like a teenager. But she's smiling. Really smiling. The kind of smile I haven't seen from her in months. 3 years ago, I walked out of our marriage with my head held high, convinced I was finally choosing myself. I had a blog, a following, a community of women who told me I was brave. I had a narrative that made sense of everything. My husband was a product of the patriarchy, emotionally stunted, passive-aggressive, a classic case of modern male crisis. My divorce wasn't a failure. It was a reclamation. Now I'm sitting in my car like a stalker, crying into my steering wheel, because the court gave him primary custody, and I'm the one who has to prove I'm fit to be a parent. Let me back up. My name is Sarah. I work in diversity and inclusion for a large hospital network. It's meaningful work. I design training programs, consult on policy, speak at conferences. I've built a career out of naming systemic injustice and advocating for change. I'm good at it. On the side, I write a Substack called The Unspoken Truth. It started as a personal journal after my divorce, a place to process what I'd been through. But it grew. Women started reading it, sharing it, telling me I'd put words to their own experiences. I wrote about emotional labor, about weaponized incompetence, about how women are expected to carry the entire weight of domestic life while men just coast through. I wrote about how my ex-husband would sit on the couch and scroll through his phone while I orchestrated every meal, every appointment, every birthday party, every bedtime routine. I wrote about how I finally stopped asking for help and started demanding equality. The comments were ecstatic. You're so strong. You're an inspiration. Thank you for speaking your truth. I felt like I was doing something important, like I was part of a movement, like my pain had a purpose. My ex-husband, Tom, never read my blog. At least he never said he did. He was always so contained, so closed off. That was one of the things I wrote about, his emotional unavailability, his inability to connect. I'd try to have conversations about the division of labor, about the mental load I was carrying. And he'd just look at me with this blank expression. Okay, Sarah, what do you want me to do? As if I was supposed to manage him like an employee. As if he couldn't see what needed to be done without a list. I told my friends he was gaslighting me, making me feel like I was crazy for asking for basic partnership. They all agreed. They'd had similar experiences with their own partners. We'd get together for brunch and trade war stories, validating each other's frustrations, giving each other the language to name what was happening. The last straw was when he forgot to pick up our daughter Maya from school. I was at a conference presenting on inclusive leadership. I'd reminded him 3 times, sent him calendar invites, called him that morning. He said he had it handled. But at 3:45, I got a call from the school. Maya was sitting in the office, waiting. No one had come. I had to leave my own presentation early, drive 45 minutes back, pick her up myself. I didn't scream when I got home. I was past that. I spoke calmly, deliberately. I told him this was a pattern, a systemic pattern of disengagement, that he wasn't a partner, he was a liability, that I couldn't do it anymore. He just sat there on the couch, looked at me with that hollow expression, said okay, just okay. He didn't even try to fight for us. I wrote about that night. I called it The Silence of Men. It went viral. The divorce was straightforward at first. I had the better lawyer, the stronger case. I documented everything, every missed appointment, every forgotten commitment, every evening he'd zoned out in front of the TV while I did everything. My lawyer said we should go for full custody. The mother is almost always the primary caregiver, she told me. It's practically standard. Tom could have every other weekend. That was more than generous. Tom didn't fight it. At first, he just signed the papers and moved into a small apartment across town. I kept the house, the kids, the life we'd built. He paid child support and alimony. I felt victorious. I'd won. My blog post about the divorce was my most popular one yet, leaving the patriarchy behind. I got speaking invitations, podcast interviews. Women wrote to me saying I'd given them the courage to leave their own unsatisfactory relationships. I was a hero. I was living proof that you could choose yourself and thrive. The first year was hard, but I told myself it was temporary. I was adjusting to single parenthood. The kids, Maya was 9, Jordan was 7, were adjusting too. They missed their dad, but I explained to them that sometimes grown-ups need to make hard choices to be happy. That I was doing this for all of us. That we would be stronger together, just the three of us. They nodded. They seemed to understand. I made sure I was the one who framed the narrative. I didn't want Tom mangling the message with his emotional incompetence. Then Tom hired a lawyer. I remember the day I got the counteroffer. I was at work, preparing a presentation on unconscious bias. The email from my lawyer popped up with the subject line, "Response from Mr. Allen's counsel." I opened it with a smirk. A counteroffer. How cute. My blood turned to ice. He was requesting 50-50 custody. Week on, week off. No alimony. I had a high-paying career. I could support myself. Sell the house and split the equity. Child support calculated based on equal time and equal incomes, which would mean, essentially, nothing. He was going to take my children from me. I called my lawyer immediately. "What the hell is this?" "Sarah," she said, her voice strained. "This is what happens when fathers get representation. His lawyer is good. Like, really good. We're going to have to negotiate." Negotiate? He's trying to steal my kids. He's asking for equal time. In this state, that's the default presumption. We need to show the court why that would be detrimental. I started researching. I dove into the fathers' rights movements, the MRA forums, the dark corners of the internet. It was all there. The language of equality being used to mask misogyny. These men didn't actually want to do the work of parenting. They just didn't want to pay. They wanted to win against their ex-wives. I read article after article about how shared parenting was being weaponized against mothers, how courts were ignoring the reality of emotional labor and mental load, how men who'd been absent for years were suddenly demanding 50% of their children's time just to avoid child support. This wasn't Tom. He couldn't have come up with this on his own. His lawyer had poisoned him, fed him talking points, turned him against me. We went to mediation. I came prepared with binders full of evidence, a detailed log of every meal I'd ever cooked, every appointment I'd ever scheduled, every nightmare I'd soothed. I had screenshots of his forgotten commitments. I had articles about the crisis of masculinity, about how men are emotionally stunted and incapable of deep, nurturing connection. I was going to prove that Tom was unfit for anything more than occasional visitation. Tom looked different when I walked in. He'd lost weight. His hair was cut. He was wearing a suit that actually fit. He looked confident. It was infuriating. The mediator was a woman in her 50s. I laid out my case eloquently. I talked about the mental load, the emotional labor, the systemic patterns of male disengagement. I explained that the mother is nearly always the psychological parent, the one who holds the child's entire world in her head. I cited studies. I quoted experts. I spoke the language I knew best. Tom's lawyer just took notes. Tom sat there, quiet as always. When it was his turn, he cleared his throat. "Sarah is a good mother," he said, his voice steady. She always has been, but I want to be a good father. I know I wasn't always present when we were married. That was my fault. I was unhappy. I checked out. But since we separated, I've realized how much I missed. I've changed my work schedule. I'm more flexible now. I want to be there for my kids 50% of the time. Not to punish Sarah, not to save money, because I love them and they deserve both of us. It was a performance, rehearsed. His lawyer had coached him. I could tell. The mediator looked at me. Sarah, what he's proposing is the legal default. You need to provide specific evidence that this arrangement would harm the children. I pulled out my research. I started talking about the male crisis, how men are falling behind, suffering from emotional isolation, incapable of the nurturing work that children need. I could see the mediator shifting uncomfortably. Those are sociological arguments, she said gently. The court needs specifics about Tom, about his parenting, or lack thereof. His entire disposition is evidence, I said, my voice rising. He's emotionally unavailable. He can't connect on a deep level. He'll do to the kids what he did to me, shut down when things get difficult. That's emotional harm. That's destabilizing. The mediation ended with no agreement. My lawyer called me afterward. Sarah, you can't lecture the judge on gender theory. It won't work. You need to focus on specifics. She just doesn't get it, I said. She's a boomer. She's part of the problem. I'm trying to help you avoid a trial that could get very ugly. Let it get ugly. I'm not afraid of the truth. The next few months were hell. Depositions, financial disclosures, endless paperwork. Tom's lawyer subpoenaed my blog. They read every post, every comment. They deposed my friends. They painted me as a man-hating radical. It was character assassination. Worst of all, they assigned a custody evaluator, a court-appointed psychologist who would interview all of us, and then write a report with a recommendation to the judge, Dr. Patterson, a man in his 60s, which immediately made me nervous. How could a man possibly understand what I'd been through? I tried my usual script with him. The emotional labor, the mental load, the crisis of masculinity. He just nodded and wrote things down. So, Sarah, he asked, what do you think makes a good parent? I listed everything: nurturing emotions, encouraging expression, building self-esteem, being present, providing structure. And you believe Tom can't do any of these things? I believe he lacks the innate emotional capacity, I said. Men are socialized to suppress their emotions. They don't have the tools for deep connection. It's not their fault, but it is the reality. Dr. Patterson just wrote it down. With the kids, he was thorough. He asked Maya what it was like at my house. Mommy works a lot, she said. She's always on her computer, but she makes sure I do my homework and eat my vegetables. Jordan nodded. Mommy gets mad sometimes, when we make a mess. Then he asked about Tom's house. Daddy built me a tree house, Maya said, her face lighting up. We painted it pink. It has a rope swing and everything. He makes pancakes, Jordan added, and he lets us have sleepovers in the living room. We watch movies and eat popcorn, and he doesn't care if we fall asleep on the floor. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Disneyland, Dad. Of course they liked it there. It was a vacation. I was the one doing the hard work, the actual parenting. The evaluator's report came out a month before the trial. My lawyer forwarded it to me without comment. I read it, and the world fell out from under me. It described me as intelligent and articulate, but rigid in her thinking, viewing her husband and children through a theoretical lens, rather than as individuals. It said I presented with significant anger and resentment toward Tom. It noted that I was often distracted during the observation, frequently checking my phone or working on my laptop while the children were nearby. Regarding Tom, it said he was reserved but engaged, demonstrating a strong bond with both children. It detailed his interactions: patient, attentive, warm. He'd successfully calmed a tantrum from Jordan. He'd facilitated a difficult conversation with Maya about a friendship issue at school. He was sincere and credible in his desire to be an equal co-parent. The recommendation, 50-50 custody, and then the knife twist. Tom should be designated the parent of primary residence for school purposes, because his apartment was in a better school district and his work schedule was more flexible. And finally, I should attend co-parenting counseling to address my hostility toward Tom, which the evaluator described as a potential source of emotional harm to the children. I was the problem. The report said I was the problem. I called my lawyer, screaming about misogyny and bias and how Dr. Patterson had been charmed by Tom. She was quiet for a long time. "Sarah," she said, "I think you need to settle. The judge is going to take this report very seriously." "No," I said. "I will not be silenced. I will not let this man and this broken system steal my children. We are going to trial." She fired me, said she couldn't effectively represent me if I insisted on this path, said my personal feelings were blinding me to legal reality. I saw it for what it was. She was afraid. The patriarchy had gotten to her too. I decided to represent myself. Who could tell my story better than me? The day of the trial, I wore my best power suit. I sat at the table alone, surrounded by my binders. Tom was there with his lawyer. He wouldn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her late 60s, a reputation for being tough but fair. Good. She'd understand. Tom's lawyer presented his case first. Simple and clean. He called Tom to the stand, and Tom talked about his flexible schedule, presented photos of the kids' rooms at his apartment, spoke calmly about wanting to be a father. Then he called Dr. Patterson, who testified to everything in his report. It was my turn to cross-examine. "Dr. Patterson," I began, "you are aware, are you not, that there is a well-documented crisis of masculinity in this country? That men are struggling with emotional regulation, with connection, with the basic tools of nurturing?" Tom's lawyer objected. The judge let me continue. "My point is that your evaluation ignored the broader context. You evaluated one man, but you didn't evaluate the system that shaped him. How can you recommend a man be an equal parent when men, as a demographic, are failing at emotional connection?" Dr. Patterson looked at me calmly. "I was asked to evaluate Tom Allen, not masculinity in general. In my professional opinion, he is a fit and loving parent." I tried to poke holes, but he was unshakable. I sounded like I was rambling. Then it was my turn. I called myself to the stand. I tried to tell my story. The years of carrying everything alone, the forgotten conference, the emotional absence. But I kept getting interrupted by objections, narrative, hearsay, speculation. "Ms. Davies," the judge finally said, "you must ask a question and then answer it. You cannot give a speech." It was impossible. The rules were designed to silence me. "So in your expert opinion," the judge said, "men are emotionally weaker than women and therefore less competent as parents?" "In many ways, yes," I said. "It's how they're socialized. They're not equipped for the deep work of raising healthy children." The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Davies, I have been on this bench for 30 years. I have seen wonderful mothers and terrible mothers. I have seen fathers who were absent and fathers who would do anything for their children. I have seen women use their children as weapons to punish their ex-husbands, inventing allegations, trying to alienate their children from perfectly good fathers out of spite and anger. It's a tragedy, and it's more common than you'd think. I felt my face flush. She wasn't talking about me, was she? You have presented a theory, she continued. You have not presented evidence that Tom Allen is anything but a loving father who wants to be in his children's lives. You call him emotionally weak, but the evidence shows he's the one who adapted. He changed his schedule. He found a better home. He endured your hostility and still just wants to co-parent peacefully. You, on the other hand, have shown no flexibility. You have demonstrated profound contempt for your children's father. The Evaluator's report is one of the most concerning I've ever read regarding a parent's attitude. Your conviction in your own righteousness is your greatest liability as a parent. The courtroom was silent. I couldn't breathe. The court finds it is in the best interest of the minor children that the parents share joint legal and physical custody on a week-on, week-off basis. Mr. Allen will be designated the parent of primary residence for school enrollment. Ms. Davies is ordered to complete a 12-week co-parenting counseling program. Proof of completion must be filed with this court. Failure to comply will result in a review of the custody arrangement. She banged the gavel. It was over. I just sat there. My binders, my blog posts, my truth, all worthless. Tom stood up and looked over at me. There was no triumph in his eyes, no I told you so, just sadness. Deep, heavy sadness. He'd known this would destroy me. He didn't want it. He just wanted his children. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, and they walked out. I was left alone in the courtroom with my worthless binders. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't face my children, not knowing I was the one who'd lost them. I drove around for hours, circling the city, watching other families walk down the street, other parents pushing strollers, other couples holding hands. Everyone seemed so normal, so functional, like they hadn't failed the most important test of their lives. I ended up at my friend Becca's house. She was the one who'd encouraged me to leave, who'd validated my anger, who'd told me I was brave. She opened the door and saw my face, and her expression crumpled. Sarah, oh Sarah. She hugged me, and I fell apart. I told her everything, the trial, the judge, the custody arrangement. I expected her to be outraged. I expected her to tell me it was rigged, that the system was broken, that I'd been robbed. Instead, she was quiet for a long time. Becca, I said, aren't you going to say anything? She sat down across from me. Sarah, you need to hear something, and you're not going to like it. Tell me. I don't think Tom is a bad guy. I never did. I mean, I agreed with you at the time. You were my friend. I wanted to support you. But, she hesitated. Your marriage wasn't just his fault. You were so consumed by your work, by your blog, by all the theories. You never really saw him. He was just a prop in your narrative. And the kids, they're not props, Sarah. They're people. They love their father. They need him. I stared at her. You think this is my fault? I think you've spent years telling yourself a story that makes you the hero and everyone else either a villain or a victim. And that story doesn't leave any room for nuance, or for growth, or for the possibility that maybe you made mistakes too. I didn't make mistakes. I stood up for myself. I refused to be silenced. By who? Becca asked. Who was silencing you? Tom never fought you on anything. He just checked out. That was wrong. That was his failing. But you used it as evidence for a whole worldview that gave you permission to stop trying, to stop seeing him as a person with his own struggles. to stop seeing your kids as anything but your project. I didn't have a response. I just sat there, numb. Becca reached out and took my hand. You need to go to that counseling, Sarah. You need to figure out how to co-parent with Tom, not for him, for Maya and Jordan. They deserve a mother who can let go of her anger enough to see them clearly. I left Becca's house at midnight. I drove to Tom's apartment and parked across the street. The lights were off. The kids were in there, sleeping in their beds, in their rooms, in his apartment. Their rooms, not mine. His. The next morning, Maya called me. "Mommy, are you coming to get me today?" I'd forgotten. It was my week, the custody schedule. I'd been so consumed with my own grief that I'd forgotten I still had time with them. "Yes, baby, I'll be there soon." When I arrived, Tom opened the door. He looked tired. He looked at me, hesitant, uncertain. "Sarah," he said, "are you okay?" Was I okay? I'd just lost the custody battle. I'd been ordered to take counseling. I'd been made to feel like I was the problem. But as I watched my kids come running toward me, their faces bright with excitement, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't about whether I was okay. It was about whether they were okay. And they were. They were laughing and hugging me and telling me about their week with their dad. "Mommy, Daddy made a slip and slide in the backyard," Jordan said. "It was so cool. Daddy let me stay up late to finish my book," Maya added. "He read it with me." I looked over at Tom. He was watching us from the doorway, his hands in his pockets, a small smile on his face. He looked happy, not triumphant, just happy. "That's great, sweetie," I said, pulling Maya close. "That sounds like fun." I drove them back to my house. I made them lunch. I watched them play in the yard. I sat on the porch and stared at the grass and felt the weight of everything I'd done wrong. The counseling started 2 weeks later. I sat in the office with Tom, separated by the therapist's coffee table, both of us trying not to look at each other. "I understand you two are here because of a custody order," the therapist said. "But I'm hoping we can make this about something more than compliance. Sarah, can you tell me what you'd like to get out of these sessions?" I thought about it. I thought about my blog, my readers, all the women who told me I was an inspiration. I thought about how I'd shaped my entire identity around being right. I thought about the look on Tom's face when the judge announced the custody arrangement. "I want to stop hating him," I said quietly. "I want to stop seeing him as the enemy. I want to be okay with him being a good father." Tom looked up at me, surprised. "I know that's not what you expected," I said. "It's not what I expected either. But I lost. I lost because I was wrong. Not about everything, but about him. I was wrong about him." Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was wrong too. I checked out. I should have fought harder for us. I should have been present. I was dealing with my own stuff and I shut you out. That wasn't fair." We both looked at the therapist, who was smiling gently. "That's a good start," she said. "Now let's talk about what happens next." It's been 6 months since the trial. I'm writing this sitting on my back porch while Maya and Jordan play in the yard. They'll be going to Tom's house tomorrow. I used to dread that. Now I see it as part of the rhythm of our lives. My blog is still up, but I haven't posted in months. I get emails from readers asking if I'm okay. I don't know how to answer them. The truth is, I was never okay. I was using my anger to avoid the grief of losing my marriage, and I didn't even realize it. I was so busy being right that I forgot to be present. I was so busy fighting the patriarchy that I forgot to fight for my family. Tom and I are still not friends. We're working on it. Last week, we had dinner together with the kids. It was awkward and stilted. But Maya told me later it was her favorite night in months. She said it felt like we were a family again. She said it felt like she had two parents who loved her instead of two people who hated each other. I still think about all of it. The missed conference, the forgetting, the years of disengagement. Those things happened. I didn't imagine them, but I missed something too. I missed the fact that Tom was drowning. I missed the fact that my constant criticism was making him retreat further. I missed the fact that my kids were watching me dismiss their father and learning that love means contempt. The therapist told me something that stayed with me. She said, "Sarah, you thought you were fighting for equality. But equality isn't about being right. It's about being willing to see the humanity in the people who disagree with you. It's about recognizing that your partner is not your enemy, even when you're angry." I've started writing again, not for my blog, just for myself, a journal. I'm trying to understand how I got here, how someone who genuinely wanted to fight for justice ended up doing so much damage to the people she loved most. My readers, the ones who still email me, want answers. They want to know how I found my way out of the anger. I don't have an easy answer. The truth is, I still wrestle with it. Some days I look at Tom and feel the old resentment rise up. Some days I look at my kids and think about all the time I lost, all the moments I was too busy being right to actually be there. But I'm working on it. I'm going to counseling. I'm letting go of my need to be the hero of every story. I'm learning to see other people as fully human, not as representatives of a system, not as evidence for a theory, but as individuals with their own messy, complicated, contradictory lives. Yesterday, Maya asked me if I wanted to bake cookies with her. I said yes. We made a mess. I let her lick the spoon. We sat on the floor and ate warm cookies, and she told me about a boy in her class who was mean to her. And I listened. I didn't turn it into a lesson about patriarchy or gender dynamics. I just listened. I held her hand. I told her I was sorry that happened. Afterward, she hugged me and said, "Mommy, you're being more fun lately." I told her I was trying. I'm trying.